Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a new EU policy that is seriously about to shake up the price of, well, almost everything, from the steel in our buildings to the cement on our roads. It's called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or, as you'll hear it a lot, CBAM.
So what does that really mean for you and me? Well, think of it this way. The EU is literally putting a price tag on pollution. If a product is made in a way that creates a ton of carbon emissions, it's now going to cost more to bring it into Europe. Simple as that.
And listen, this isn't some far-off idea we're talking about. As of January 1st, 2026, the rules of the game have fundamentally changed. This new carbon border is a reality, and it's already redrawing the trade map for anyone who wants to sell certain goods in one of the world's biggest markets.
So, how does this whole thing actually work? It all comes down to a key concept called embedded emissions. It's like the invisible carbon backpack that a product carries with it. The EU is now looking at that entire journey, from the factory floor all the way to the port, especially for heavy hitters like steel, aluminum, and cement.
Okay, so let's get practical. If you're a business that imports these kinds of goods, what does this actually mean for your day-to-day operations? Let's break down the new rules of the game.
For any business caught in this net, compliance is basically a three-step dance. First up, you've got to get official by registering as an authorized CBAM declarant. Next, and this is the big one, comes the paperwork. You have to calculate and report the precise emissions for every single thing you import. And then finally, you pay the piper. Starting in 2027, you'll need to buy and then surrender special CBAM certificates to cover all those emissions you reported. But here's the real kicker. What happens if you don't have that data? Or maybe you just don't report it? Well, this is where the policy really, and I mean really, shows its teeth. The EU has built in a penalty that is designed to be painful.
And just look at the potential damage here. If you can't provide that verified data, you get slapped with what's called a default value. Now get this, that default isn't an average. Oh no, it's based on the performance of the absolute worst polluters, the top 10% most carbon-intensive producers out there. Your cost could literally triple overnight, basically pricing you right out of the European market. Which, of course, brings us to the billion-dollar question at the very heart of all this. Is CBAM a legitimate tool to fight climate change? Or is it really just protectionism dressed up in green clothing, a new kind of trade barrier?
And believe me, this isn't just a philosophical question for a university classroom. It's the basis of a massive legal battle that's playing out right now at the World Trade Organization, the global referee of trade, as countries line up to argue their case.
So you've really got two main corners in this legal ring. On one side, you have critics screaming that this is a classic hidden tariff. They say it's an unfair barrier that hurts smaller companies in developing nations the most. But on the other side, the EU is firing back, saying this is all perfectly legal. Their whole defense hinges on a principle called national treatment, which basically means, hey, we're treating your imported goods exactly the same way we treat our own domestic ones. Same carbon price for everyone.
Okay, so let's step out of the courtroom for a second. Legal arguments aside, what's the real-world impact? Because this policy is already sending massive shockwaves around the world, forcing entire countries to rethink their export strategies.
You can already see major players scrambling to adapt. Take India. Its steelmakers are actively looking for new markets in Asia and the Middle East, trying to dodge that EU tax hit. Then you have China, which is speeding up the expansion of its own domestic carbon market to try and align its system with the EU's. And then there are countries like Bangladesh, which are in a really tough spot. They just don't have enough accredited inspectors to verify their emissions data, which makes them incredibly vulnerable to getting hit with those crushing default fees.
And here's the thing you have to understand. The EU might have fired the starting gun, but they are not the only ones in this race. This idea, this model of tying trade to carbon emissions is starting to spread. It could very well become the new global standard.
For example, look at the UK. It's launching its own version of CBAM in 2027. But with a twist. While the EU demands super strict independent third-party verification, the UK is floating the idea of a self-reporting system. Now that can make things easier for businesses, or it could create a system with a lot less bite. The jury is still out.
So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? The EU's carbon border tax isn't just another regulation. It's a signal of a fundamental shift in how global trade works. The environmental cost of making something is no longer just some external factor. It's fast becoming a core part of its price. Which leaves us with one pretty big question for the future. Are we heading into a new era where every single product needs a carbon passport just to cross a border?